Welcome back. In this video, we'll cover how to take the board you glued up yesterday and turn it into this 13 1/4 by 13 1/4 by 3/4 inch thick square. And we'll also go through the process of laying out and drilling the 4 holes in the corner so that we get those in the correct location. So this is my project I was working with yesterday. It's been in the clamps for at least an hour. Mine dried overnight. So I'm going to take it out of the clamps now. And this is a very important step. Take care of your tools and supplies. Put them away so nobody else has to. Put the clamps back on the rack. Now, when you go over to the rack, I'd advise grabbing a smaller clamp and one of our paint scrapers off the top of the rack. And what I'm going to use that to do is on the bottom edge of my project where that glue dripped out, I'm going to take the paint scraper in just a minute and scrape those bubbles of glue off, just so my project will feed through the planer easier in a moment. So I'm going to clamp this in place so it doesn't slide around, put my safety glasses on so I don't get glue gobbers in my eye, and we'll knock those bubbles off. Now we're ready for the planer. Now, my goal at the planer is to get my board 3/4 inch thick, and I also want to get 2 flat surfaces. So I want to get this surface and this surface flat and parallel to each other. Keep in mind when we plane, we always want to go with the direction of the grain. So this glue joint will be going parallel to the outer edges of our planer. The last person probably planed a 3/4 inch thick, so I'm going to take this handle and lower the planer bed down until my project makes it under this tab. And that'll be a good starting spot. Now, as I plane, I'll use my gauge block to confirm my thickness with a goal of 3/4 inch. This side is flat. Now I'm going to flip it to this side. Now that I've got 2 smooth parallel sides, I'm going to concentrate on one of the long edges, straightening and squaring that up. So I want to get a straight line, and I also want it at a 90-degree angle to these sides. We'll do that at the jointer. Make sure you only use the jointer for the long edge grain. We never want to joint end grain, or the grain where you can see the growth rings in our woods class. I'm at the table saw now, and I'm going to start working towards my finished width of 13 1/4. In the last step, I jointed one edge, so I'm going to position that jointed edge against the fence, which is set for 13 1/4, and then I'll rip off the excess material on this side. Now, if you've got 2 kind of rough edges on your project, you might choose to set this fence larger than 13 1/4. Establish a second straight edge, which will rip off some scrap, and then flip your project one more time to cut to the final length of 13 1/4. This piece is wide enough other students could use it, so I'll put it back in the cutoff bin. So you'll remember when we went to the jointer, we talked about never jointing end grain on the jointer. We're going to clean that up at the miter saw now. I've got 2 straight parallel edges on my long edges. I'm going to take one of those, put it tightly against the fence, Make sure my project is flat on the table, and I'll use the miter saw to establish a straight edge here. Right? Now with these long boards, or wide boards rather, it's important that if we hold it flat on the table, if your hand gets too far out here, you can see your project will tip. So we want to put our holding hand back close to the fence to make sure we've got good pressure on our board. The other thing I'll do is sometimes the saw likes to bind up when we cut these wide boards, so I'll start by making a plunge cut at the back. I'll lift the saw, bring it to the front, drop it down, and then finish my cut. It'll look something like this. Now at this point, I can take and flip my board 180 degrees, and I could cut this to 13 1/4 on the miter saw, or if you're more comfortable, you could go back to the table saw. I prefer the table saw for this long cut, so here I am. This is the edge I just cut on the miter saw. I'll put that against the fence and make one final pass to get this board into a perfect square shape. And down to the correct dimensions of 13 1/4 by 13 1/4 by 3/4 of an inch thick. Now that we've cut that to the correct size, we can drill our holes in the corner. All right, so I'm done at the saws, and you'll notice I'm not at the gluing table anymore. I decided to move over to a workbench so that other students could use the table for glue-ups if they need to. My goal here is to take and make this board look like this board. And you'll notice there's 4 holes drilled in 3/4 of an inch from each side on all 4 corners of this. That's very important because when we put this on the CNC router, it's going to cut a circle in the middle using an $80 router bit. If we get these holes in the wrong spot and the $80 router bit hits it, it will no longer work the way it should. It's going to slow yourself down and the rest of the class. So we want to make sure we don't have a collision between our holding mechanism and the cutting tool when we bring it over to the CNC router in future steps. So to measure that out, I'm going to take my pencil and a speed square, and I'll use the scale on the speed square. I've got it pushed tight to my project. I'm going to put my pencil at the 3/4 inch mark, and then I'm just going to slide my pencil down. That'll let me make a straight line on my project. I'll rotate my speed square 90 degrees, put my pencil at 3/4 of an inch again, and this time I'm sliding it from left to right. And where there's 2 lines intersect is where I will drill one of my 2 holes. Now I just need to repeat that 3 more times. Now with my holes drawn, I can take and drill some holes. I guess I didn't draw my holes, I marked the location for them. Anyhow, now that I've got that done, I'll grab my drill. I've taken the 3/16 inch drill out of our drill index, and I'll use it to drill these holes. When I drill them, I'm going to hold my project over the edge of the table, so when this drill bit breaks through, it's drilling into air instead of our workbench tops. There's one, and I'll repeat that 3 more times. Now at this point, I would recommend taking a look at your project and deciding which side looks the nicest. That's the side we're going to want to put up when we go to the router in our future demos. That's the side that'll get the holes drilled into it, the pocket cut into it. The other side is going to end up being the bottom of your project. And it's not that I forgot about yesterday. I'm going to leave the full thing on the top side of my project. Down on the bottom here, it kind of gets split in half because it goes through my board at an angle. So I think I'll make this the bottom. The reason I want you to identify the bottom is because we need to put our name back on our project. It got planed off in an earlier step. There it is, and there's my finished product. So that's what you need to get through today. It's time for you to get your stuff and get to work. We'll pick this up in the next video.